Alright, so welcome to part 2. We're going to start doing all of the editing. Now, the thing that we're going to be using pretty much throughout the whole video is this section right here, which is, if you hit this little right button here, it opens up the Quantize panel. So this is the thing that we're going to be using. There's a few little quick toggle on and off switches here and a drop down menu. But all of these features are embedded within this Quantize panel. Important to know is that there's actually two modes to this thing here. There's when you have stuff selected in group mode, there's both the slice piece of this and the quantize piece of it. So when you don't have the group mode, the group editing mode enabled, even if you have multiple tracks selected, it's not going to have the slice portion of the Quantize panel. So that's kind of just important to think about and to realize. Now, immediately you can see that there's this priorities thing that we were talking about. There's just a list of all the different tracks that we have selected in the group editing group part here. There's a few specifications as to what we're supposed to be doing to those slices. So I'll tackle some of this stuff first. So as I said before, we're going to be using the close mics as a reference point to where we're going to be making the slices. So we've chosen the kick in. We don't want the kick out. We've chosen the kick snare top and the 3 tom mics. The reason why I do that is because the kick in is the closest sound source to the beating of the drum. So where the batter meets the skin, it's the closest point to that sound source. So if we were to use the kick out mic, the kick out mic is actually like milliseconds, just barely a few milliseconds later in time than the kick in. So if we were to set this as a 0 millisecond offset, and I'll explain this in a little bit, then if we were using the kick out as the priority, you can see that the hit point is before the kick in is actually, the kick in is before the actual hit point detection. So that's not where we want to slice this, because it's going to be slicing at a peak, a positive peak in the kick in mic. So that's why I use the kick in as a priority, because you can see here it's going to capture both of these kick drum mics and not disturb the signal in the files here. Now the same goes for the snare top. It's more of a close mic source to where the stick is hitting the actual skin, and the toms are a good reference point, because we're not going to try and use the overheads to determine where the tom hits are and where we're going to slice for the tom hits. We're going to use the close mics on the toms. Now let's quickly jump to a section where there are toms, and we'll just determine how this is going to work. So we want the kick to be the ultimate first priority. So we've selected here 5 stars on the priority. Snare can be a close second. You can see when we're moving these things around, these slice points are jumping around. And that's because the priorities between the snare and the toms are being kind of cross-pathed. I'll just zoom in here so we can see better. So right now we have slice points right here, and right here for the kick drum. That's all fine and dandy. But we also have some tom hits and some snare hits that we want to worry about. If we were to select the tom as also a 5-star, it's going to shift a lot of these slice points to the snare as being the slice point. So we just want to think about what we're doing here. In this part of the drums here, in this part of the song, let's solo the drums. So this is me playing the drums. I'm hitting the tom before I'm hitting the snare, and I'm doing that because I wanted to do a flam. That's what's called a flam. I'm also hitting, it looks like, or maybe I'm not hitting the kick drum. I could be, yeah, actually I'm not hitting the kick drum. I'm only hitting the kick drum in between those hits. So the kick drum right now, this is fine. We want this hit, and that hit. That's perfect. But we don't want to slice the tom hits where the snare is being hit, because then that's going to push the flam into less of a flam and more of just coincidental hits. So we're going to keep the first hit, so the toms, as the reference point. So we're going to adjust the snare to a priority where it's not above the tom hits here. So I hope this is all making sense. That's our main focus. That's what all of this priority stuff is all about, is to determine where the slice points are. So now that we've done that, that's pretty much all there is to this part of the song that we're tweaking, because there's pretty much nothing going on until that tom hits, those tom hits over here. Now, there's also what's called a minimum distance between the two hit points. That's this part here, the range. You can set that to be greater than 0, all the way up to 100 milliseconds. And what that means is there cannot be 2 hit points within a set millisecond range. So right here we can see there's 2 hit points being generated. The red is highlighted where there's going to be a slice. If we were to increase this range, we could see at 29 milliseconds, this hit point right here has now disappeared, because it is over the range allowable that we have just set for it to have a hit point. So if we increase that even more, then we get rid of almost all of these. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to make sure that we're not slicing this snare as well, because what we want is the tom as the slice point, and we want to keep that millisecond distance between the tom and the snare to keep the flam. Yeah, so there's that. You can also adjust the offset. So we have slice points right here, which is the exact point where it's determined a hit point. If you increase the offset by a distance of so many milliseconds, you're just pushing the slice point over however many milliseconds that you determine. This is smart to do and to use, because sometimes the hit points will be somewhere closer to before the actual hit point. Also, there might be, in the same sense, let's say we're slicing the kick drum, and there's parts of the kick drum or from another instrument that are hit before that other instrument, like that kick drum, then you would be slicing in the midpoint and whatnot. So it's good to just set a good offset. I usually go somewheres minimally about -3 milliseconds. Somewheres around 4 or 5 seems to do the trick. But again, just have a look at where there's some important points where the audio file can be negatively affected if you slice it too close to the hit point. So just keep that in mind. Oh yeah, there's a lot to explain here, but let's keep on trekking. So there's this button here is the audio warp quantize. So rather than making slices and moving those slices around, it's going to be creating hit point cues and then just moving the audio source around by stretching it. It's going to warp it. You see how it's moving those hit points around? These are warp marker creation rules, so that's kind of a different rule here. If we were doing the warp, we would have it in this mode, and we would set priority as per that and change the range. And then we would create those warp markers, and then we would be quantizing to the grid using the audio warp function. Now we haven't done that yet. It's just this is just switching the mode and determining the warp markers in this section. We're not going to be doing that because I'll probably do a demonstration a little bit later how it can actually negatively affect the sound of the drum kit here by warping it too much. So if the timing is not like dead perfect to begin with, and you're stretching and warping the sound or the audio files to make them quantized, then you might be stretching them so much that you hear a pitch difference and things like that. So I'll maybe do a demonstration of that, but we're going to just focus on doing slicing for the meantime. So basically we've set our parameters of what we want to do. Now we're going to create the slices. So you hit the slice point or the slice button, and it has now just created slice points to all of those specified hit points that were red. It's made all those slices, and it's sliced each of the tracks at the exact same place, and that's what we want. That's the point of all of this group editing and this Quantize panel. Now we have to determine what quantization rule we're going to work with. I think I've already predetermined that it's going to be a 1/8 triplet note. Let's just quickly hit the quantize and then see how it sounds, because I want to make sure that that's the proper time signature and whatnot that we're dealing with. So that's proper. That's the right quantize mode or quantize grid rule that we're dealing with. That's perfect, but you can hear it's quite choppy. We're going to fix that with the crossfades. In the meantime, we're going to undo that. We're going to reset the quantize, because what I'm going to use is the IQ, the interactive quantize mode. I like that a lot because it moves it and quantizes it, but not perfectly and robotically, like some kind of weird computer playing the drums or anything. It's going to keep a natural feel, but it's going to move it closer towards perfect timing. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. We can set a swing rule. We can set a kind of ticks range. There's all kinds of stuff here. There's a catch range in percentage. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to kind of just ignore that stuff because that's more advanced techniques that don't really serve this tutorial, at least. So we're going to look at this thing here where you can randomize ticks, meaning when it's making quantize, it's moving those files around. You can set where some randomization errors, essentially, where it's going to make the perfect quantization to how you've specified 60% towards perfect quantization, but it's also going to randomize those movements. The more ticks, the more randomized it's going to be in the quantization. So it's another way of trying to shuffle it around and creating less of a robotic, perfect quantization. But again, that's more kind of advanced things that I don't even really understand. So I'm going to kind of just skip those for now. Like I said, there's an audio warp mode. So we're just going to ignore that. There's also this function here, MIDI CC. So you would be moving, what does it say? Quantize also moves MIDI controllers. So there's, yeah, something to do with MIDI. We're not working with MIDI right now. So we're going to set, I like around 60%, probably no more than 60%. Less can be good as well. This auto button here is basically just going to automatically quantize everything. Sorry, we have to be out of this mode here, but it would be automatically quantizing all of these things as we're changing the rules. It's automatically moving them around, as opposed to making changes and then hitting the quantize button. So that's all that auto button does, and that's what the quantize button does. And you, at any time, you can reset the quantize and you can reset the slices. So that's quite handy. Instead of using the standard undo here and history and stepping back and trying to remember all that stuff, it reinitiates the slice points and the quantize points to what you had it, as per what you had like before when you just opened this Quantize panel. So really handy. So now, again, really long-winded, but this stuff is kind of important to understand. So now we're going to quantize to a 1/8 triplet grid. We're going to use the IQ mode here at 60%. Hit the quantize button. You can see stuff moved around, and it's choppy. We don't want that. We're going to use the crossfades here. You can manually do crossfades, but this is really handy in here because when you hit the crossfade mode, it automatically crossfades everything that was selected. So you can see in all of these cases there's crossfades. You can easily and quickly determine the length of all of the crossfades all at once while they're still highlighted. Usually with drums, a smaller crossfade works better, and the crossfade being closer to the actual slice points is better, unless it's going to overlap with an audio source from the initial audio source here. So if there was a drum hit that we're moving significantly to the right, like if we're moving this significantly over, because these are now two audio files, this is still going to be present in this audio file, but it's going to be a duplicated drum hit that's going to be moved over. So there's really going to be one of these embedded in this audio file, kind of just behind here. So if we were to, let's zoom in here, you can see actually the tail end. Let's zoom out a little bit. Oh boy. Let's change modes here. Whoa, nope. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So you can see right here when we're moving this around, this exact same hit, this drum hit, is still in this file. And when you allow that hit to come through in the crossfade, then it's going to sound weird because then there's a beginning kind of faded in drum hit plus the drum hit again. So let's see if we can hear that. It's actually not that noticeable because it's fairly minor, but in other cases you would probably hear that. So yeah, rule of thumb is you don't go too close to the hit points, because when you're moving quantized, or when you're moving those files around and quantizing them, you're going to be having that overlap between the exact same hits. So you move that to a point where there's not overlap, and you want to have a fairly small length for a crossfade. Switch modes again. All right. Yeah, so that's that. Also, you can nudge them around like this. You can adjust the length globally and nudge them around globally. You can also open this editor here where you can determine whether it's going to be equal gain that causes, or that's, you can determine determine it, holy man, determine it to be equal gain or equal power. That's going to be crossfaded. Either one works fine, and then you can set the crossfade pattern. Now with drums, again, a rule of thumb is either one of these here, these extremes, tend to work quite well because you're crossfading some very transient things here. So I'm not even sure if I'm going to explain this right, but when you have these types of crossfades, you can eliminate the weirdness by choosing one of the two crossfades here. So you can see if you choose one of the two, that is actually going to determine whether there's a lot of the overlap between these two hits and whether there's almost none. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is there's length, adjustability of length, adjustability of nudge, and adjustability of the type of crossfade. I think I used this type because of what you've just seen. It eliminates that overlap. And I usually go with gain and a small-ish length. So you can also save presets and use certain presets as a default and things like that. So you can mess around with that. Now that we've crossfaded, let's have a listen to the entire thing, because we've set a global rule and we might have to tweak certain hits here and there. So now let's just have a listen. So it sounds like it's pretty darn good to the click, like the metronome or whatever. It's pretty good. We're just going to take off the click so we can hear exactly what's going on in the drums, and making sure that all those fades, crossfades and everything are set properly. Because we're not going to be hearing a click track when the song is finished. We're going to be hearing just the drums. It's also good to have a good pair of headphones to listen for these types of things when you're doing the editing, because you get a little bit more detail and precision in the listening. I think right here there's a hit that sounds off time, or something glitchy. Let's just quickly look at that. Yeah, to be honest, I don't know what it is. It might just be the way that I was playing the drums. I don't know. Something's weird though. It's like cut off too soon or something. Let's try extending that crossfade. Oh, you know what I heard was the hi-hats. Let's zoom in on this thing and zoom in on the waveform. So there's definitely something going on in the hats. So if we take a crossfade that's a little bit longer and further away from that point here, that hit point, let's see if that changes. And right now I've just set that globally to all of these things here. So it's still not fixed. I think it might be better though. in the context of the music, it might just sound like a normal hit. So for the time being, let's zoom out and we'll hear it in the context of the mix. Oops. And keep in mind, these are all scratch tracks. Okay, let's solo that and listen to it with the click. So with the click, it's sounding quite a bit more on time since we've just edited it. But I don't like how it's sounding. It's sounding kind of robotic or something weird going on. Let's just see what this end piece sounds like. So this part is really good. Yeah, so that's the kind of things you're looking out for, is do those changes make the drums sound better, or is it starting to sound weird because it's too robotic? Maybe there's too much gap in between the hits and it's starting to sound choppy. Unnatural could be the word for it. I think this sounds kind of a little too unnatural. So we're going to reset that quantize. Try something more like 40%, so less quantized. We've just kept the same crossfade, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's see if it sounds any better. Now we're starting to hear, or at least I'm starting to hear, some disturbances in the crashes. Let's see if we can hear that. Right there, all between these slices here. There's something weird going on in the crashes. So maybe I'll just play it again in case you missed that. You can really hear that it's been cut and moved around. So that's why having short crossfades is better. Now let's listen to it again. So it doesn't fix it, but it makes it a little bit better. I'll just use my headphones again. Yeah, it's not perfect, but I think it's good enough so we don't want to screw this up here. I think it's good enough so that in the mix you just won't even hear it. But let's check again. I've just made it shorter. Now it's only 5 milliseconds long. So it's kind of strange that a really short crossfade makes this entire drum take less choppy. You would think that having more crossfades would smooth everything out, but it's kind of counterintuitive, at least to me. I did hear something almost like a click or something, so we're going to hear this again. right there. So right before I hit that crash, there's right here, there's overlap. So because everything else sounded a lot better than what we had before, we're going to deselect all of that stuff here. And we're going to make the change to just this file here. So we're just going to move the crossfade over. So that fixed that. And then you would just double check everything again. There was something in a kick drum, I think. This is just too far off the mark, I think. So if we move this around, just kind of manually adjust this, you could see, yeah, this was really quite far off in the original take. So if we highlight those two now, put the crossfade on, deselect it, then move over to this area. We don't want this crossfade to affect this negatively. Now we'll have a listen to that. Once again. I guess it's kind of just okay. It's probably just the way that I played the drum that makes it sound weird. But I think it'll do. So it's a very kind of relaxed drum beat, very slow, and we've kept at least some of the original groove per se. Like we're not hard quantizing where it's going to be perfectly moved to the grid, like completely lined up. 40% is actually less than I thought would sound best, but sometimes I work up to 60%. Either way, just mess around with that, try and get a good feel. Some songs may benefit from more quantization than less, and vice versa. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is when you're doing the next section, we're going to be listening to this. And we're going to be making slices and determining the grid mark here as per what this is. Once we do all the quantize and the crossfade and everything, these two files here will not be crossfaded. So once we're done with that, we have to go back here and manually crossfade between these two sections. If you were to do this entire thing as a whole and hit the crossfade, you wouldn't have to worry about doing between the sections manually. But that drastically changes the way you're doing the slicing and quantizing. So that's why I section it off, because it's much more precise to the actual drum beat that you're playing in the different sections of the song. So I don't think I have to demonstrate this part, but maybe we'll do this and then crossfade it and everything, just because this might be a different time signature or whatever it is here. So let's just quickly slice it and quantize 100%. Actually, let's leave it at 40-ish and take it off. Quantize and just listen. So it totally ruined this drum fill, that's for sure. Let's see if 16th notes works. Nope, not even close. Let's see if a 16th note triplet works. Oops. Yeah, see, those drum fills are not working very well at all. Let's see if we can go one smaller. No, it's adjusting everything a little too much. If we do a 32nd note. No. So it's definitely a triplet thing going on. Unless there's a dotted 1/32 dotted. No. So yeah, it's definitely a triplet thing. In this case, what I would do is I would take away all of this stuff here. I would actually section off these drum fills. Or even, I might even just keep it unquantized. If it's good enough to the click, and I think it's fine, like at least close enough, I might just leave it the way it is. Maybe there will be like one or two kick drums that are just too far off the mark. I'll go in and I'll slice it manually, move it around manually, and that way I'm not affecting everything, because the only reason why you want to use this is because there's a lot of chopping and crossfading and quantizing to do. But if there's only a few cases, let's say a drum fill here, and then a drum fill here, and then a kick hit right here, those are 3 instances. You do not need to slice all of these things up, quantize, crossfade, and cause the potential for like just weirdness. Like when you hear something that's too robotic and whatnot, it sounds unnatural, it sounds weird. You can avoid it by making less slices. So there's that to keep in mind as well. Yeah, so hopefully you guys like that. Hopefully that explains at least most of this here. Yeah, and the reason I'm cutting up this stuff here, I'm going to be quantizing it to as good as I can find, or as good as I can get, and then I'll be laying down the proper bass track and then the proper guitar tracks and everything. So these are just scratch tracks that were played to the raw drums. When the drums are now going to be finished, they're going to be quantized properly, all properly edited. That's going to change the way the bass and the guitar lines up with the drums. So I'm going to have to re-record bass and guitar. But that was the point in the first place, because I was just laying down what I'm going to play so that I kind of have an idea of what I'm playing. And then once these drums are fully edited, then I can do a proper recording to a edited drum, and then the mixing process comes later after everything is done. So yeah, hopefully you guys like that. This is a little bit longer than I was expecting to. I was thinking that I would do about half an hour and finish everything here, do a demonstration of the whole song. But I think I've pretty much touched on anything and everything you would need to know about doing this. So doing each one of these sections over and over again is kind of redundant. So yeah, that's it for this video. Leave a like if you like this, and leave a comment and let me know what you think about this type of video, and if maybe there's more to know about Quantize and editing drums. Let me know if you do a certain trick each and every time that you're editing drums. Maybe I'm missing like a good little trick that's handy to know. Let me know what you guys do, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.